Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dr. Terri Show. I am back in the studio with Elizabeth DiMeo, and we are talking about what is important to get hysterical about with our children and our children's health. Should we be getting hysterical about vaccines or not vaccinating? Should we get hysterical about what we're feeding our children? Should we get hysterical about what we're showing our children, what they're listening to, what they're involved in? Watch this video and then join us in the studio as we talk about these very hysterical topics.
Hi. Peter. What are you doing home from school? They sent me home. Measles.
It's either measles or a strange case of red freckles.
You have got a temperature. They told me 101.1. What's the record? Never mind.
Oh, are you sure it's the measles?
Well, he certainly got all the symptoms. A slight temperature, a lot of dots, and a great big smile.
A great big smile.
No school for a few days.
Say hello to my dotted son for me. Tell him I'll bring him some comic books and I'll see you later, dear.
Okay, honey, bye.
Boy, this is the life, isn't it?
Yeah, if you have to get sick, you sure can't beat the measles.
That's right.
No medicine.
Inside or out. Like shots, I mean.
Don't even mention shots. Yeah.
Measles, measles, measles. Well, all the kids have now had the measles.
So have I.
Well, I had them years ago. Looks like the Bradys are finished with the measles.
Hold it. You're not through yet.
Alice, don't tell me you're coming down with the measles.
Oh, I hope so. I'd hate to think I was just learning how to blush at my age.
Okay, so I love that Brady Bunch clip because I'm sitting here thinking, you found this clip on Instagram and I'm so excited to talk about it because in the 60s, it was no big deal to get the measles. Like, it was a fever, a rash, kind of like Fifth's disease, which I'm surprised they haven't gotten a vaccine against that. Yeah. Things like that. And even chicken pox. When I was a kid, we wanted to our parents wanted us exposed to chicken pox. Even I remember my oldest daughter, when she was little, when she was like 3 years old, our neighbor's little girl playmate had chicken pox. And like, oh, she can't play with Jordan today. I'm like, yes, she can. Get her over there. Let them play together because I want her to get the chicken pox and get it over. I mean, this is the natural passive immunity. There was no freak out around it or anything like that. And then I did a little more research after you sent me that and was thinking, well, when was the measles vaccine even created? And that was in the 1970s. So before that, the way we tackled the measles was we just exposed each other to get it. The Brady Bunch was a great clip, and the little girl that says, having the measles is so fun, or whatever she said.
You get to stay home.
You get to stay home and, play games, and the whole family's got the measles and they're checking it off. But let's watch this clip from a few years ago about a measles outbreak, and let's see how different it is.
How do you feel?
I'm fine. Dad says I should go to school.
7 students confirmed with measles, 4 others possible.
How? They had to have been vaccinated.
These moms never vaccinated their kids and lied about it. Vaccines are harmful.
You are endangering the health of every child in this city.
Blue. No, it's turning blue.
Call 911.
All Me SBU next Wednesday at 9, 8 Central here on NBC.
So, wow. A little different. The hysteria that was created, and, I think that Law and Order episode was in 2015, and that's when a lot of, parents were starting to be more vocal about slowing down vaccine schedules. And Pharma doesn't like us to slow down vaccine schedules.
No, they don't.
We could get all down the vaccine rant, but there's so much fear mongering around this conversation. And I know there's a bigger conversation to be had about health and wellness, but I just want to, you sent me that video, that Instagram reel in the first place, and we'll give credit to where that originally came from in the show notes. But tell me your thoughts about that, and then we'll get into talking about a bigger picture.
Well, I think for me, I was watching that and it really struck me because it's such a dichotomy between hysteria, which is this 2015 Law and Order show, which I don't even watch that kind of stuff because it's just bad energy.
It makes me crazy.
Yeah, I don't watch any of it.
It's not even how real life is, but
it isn't. And there's enough craziness going on. And then how really lackadaisical they were in the 60s. And I was born in 64. I loved the Brady Bunch. I remember watching that.
Yeah.
And, I was actually looking it up because I wasn't aware that we weren't vaccinated with the MMR until the 70s. So I think I got a polio vaccination. I never got the chicken pox.
I had oral polio vaccine.
Oh, you did?
Polio came out when I was shortly after I was born.
Yep. And to me, it really struck me because I think what's happening in America is there's so much hysteria around what parents aren't doing. Parents should be able to make decisions about what they do with their children, vaccine or no vaccine. But the biggest thing is, why isn't anybody talking about what kids are eating today? Is my kids in high school, and you see them all after school going to the local gas station and buying junk, soda and Cheez-Its and things that are blue and red, and it's not food. And you have parents feeding their kids macaroni and cheese out of a box and not eating vegetables and not getting omega-3 fats, not getting their micronutrients, not getting any protein. And we're wondering why our kids aren't well, why their immunities aren't well, depressed, anxious, not able to focus. So I'd like to see more hysteria around what we feed our kids than that, a parent decided not to vaccinate their kid along with 20 other vaccines.
Yeah, absolutely. And anytime we start talking about vaccines on the show, we're not anti-vaxxers,
right? Not.
But there's got to be a logical conversation around. I mean, polio was a devastating disease, and kids couldn't walk. I mean, it was awful. But you also have to look at the times and the crowded and the living conditions and the sanitation. And there's just so much around this conversation that it's a little bit different now. But I think the biggest thing is, and you touched on it when we were talking about it a little bit before the show, but what is happening in the womb that is causing there's a lot of theory around vaccines and autism? Well, is it because we have such two things: immature immune system? We're flooding these babies with all of these foreign, inoculating them with all these foreign materials, sending their immune systems in haywire, but they don't even have the gut and all of the other, they came from oftentimes an unhealthy mom that didn't have a healthy diet in the first place, and they're born with a bad gut. And then we're vaccinating them and we wonder why they're so sick.
I am so glad you said that because it almost astounds me how there isn't enough prenatal nutrition out there. And when I say prenatal nutrition, I mean you've got to
vitamins.
Not just a few, but I'd say eat really well. And interestingly enough, my hairdresser is pregnant and around all those chemicals and on a proton pump inhibitor and taking propylene glycol to move her bowels. And I'm thinking, and doesn't eat a lot of vegetables. And I'm just thinking, how healthy. The womb needs to be an environment where a child can develop their immunity. Yeah. And then when they come out of the vagina, they're getting the right bugs that they're supposed to get to help further develop their immunity. And then when they're nursed, they even get more. They get the immunoglobulins and everything to really, really build that immunity. But if that's not happening, and then we take a child, and as you said, immature immune systems, and we're pumping vaccine after vaccine after vaccine, of course things are going to go haywire because the gut-brain connection is there. So eating a healthy diet is probably really important, and that's what makes me apoplectic about, why aren't we talking about what our kids are eating? And why is it still so normal that they go and eat M&Ms and have a soda after school and Chick-fil-A and Wendy's and fried this and fried that? And then, our last conversation about steak and shake with beef tallow, and it's still eating French fries, which cause oxidative stress and inflammation and make us unhealthy.
Especially manufactured French fries that
right
chemicals in them. They're not
versus a potato.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, it's an interesting conversation that if you peel back this thing, there's all this attention, in the MAHA movement around autism, and, RFK is hitting a lot of different points in what feels like he has 4 short years to do, but hopefully it'll be more. But one of those things is autism. And it strikes me that why have autism rates gone up so exponentially? Well, it's not just one thing. It has to be multifactorial. It has to do with, it always goes back to diet, but diet and stress of the mother, physical stress, mental stress, emotional stress. You have a stressed baby in utero, whether it's because they're lacking or getting too much chemical burden in utero. And then to your point, they're born without a good, healthy, developed gut microbiome. And if for whatever reason the mom can't nurse, or maybe the baby was given up for adoption and it has to be fed formula out of the gate, here's a whole nother conversation. We could go off on a rant about formula.
We could.
Well, let's do it a little bit.
Oh my goodness.
Just what your thoughts are on baby formula.
Well, okay. So the first thing is that whenever I encounter, so I'm thinking back to my nutrition days when I was doing a lot of counseling. And whenever I counseled a mother that had an autistic child, she would come in with bad GI symptoms. So there was IBS present, there was GERD present, there were many things going on. So SIBO, but we didn't really, back when I started, we didn't really have that term going around so much 30 plus years ago or 25 plus years ago doing, patient after patient after patient and counseling. So I saw a connection between GI disturbances, whatever they were at the time, to that.
The term leaky gut.
Right.
Dysbiosis and all these things.
And it was, all starting to come into the fore, or getting people off gluten and dairy, or the glyphosate conversation. But now if we talk about that epigenome and we think about that child, as you say, in utero, and if they're not being fed well and they are not developing a healthy microbiome, then if they aren't nursed and they're fed formula, many of these formulas don't necessarily have healthy ingredients in them. They might have soy, genetically modified soy. What is the impact of that? They might not.
Number one ingredient, high fructose corn syrup. You're getting these kids addicted to sugar out of the womb.
Right out of the womb. Actually, I can't even deal.
You're stunned.
I'm like,
what do I say?
I can't even handle that. I'm almost like, oh my God. And I asked this other person who has implants, who said she's not going to nurse. And I'm just thinking, if she does nurse, what's she going to get from the implants to nurse the child? I mean, God made us in this beautiful, perfect, this system where this baby grows inside with an umbilical cord, and you're eating well, you're feeding the child. That child is born, is fed its infant milk for a year. The mother loses weight and is feeding the child, and the bond happens, and it's this beautiful thing. And then technically, and in many indigenous cultures, they wait 2 years to have another child so that the body can redevelop all of its nutrition again. And again, when we think about children and getting vaccines and why, again, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I vaxxed my kid, but I just waited. I only did the vitamin K shot out of the gate. I didn't do Hep B, which is, I think, what they did. And he didn't need the Hep B.
What's his risk exposure of hepatitis B? Zero. Yeah.
Zero. And for me, it was having to navigate the Massachusetts school system, and because I was in Longmeadow at the time, and trying to say, well, we're going to do it, but I'm just going to wait. And so I waited about every 6 to 8 months before I gave another one, to give it a little bit of time. I didn't know if, from a medical standpoint, was that the right thing to do, but I certainly knew
it made sense.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's a lot of, there's finger pointing in the autism. Well, autism is caused by this, and it's vaccines, it's that. I think it's got to be a multitude of many things. It's just like, we know there's a lot of different things that are increasing the risk of Alzheimer's disease. It's not just one thing. Statins are a big problem. Hormone insufficiencies are a big problem. Our diet, we're calling Alzheimer's disease type 3 diabetes now, right? So it's not just one thing. You can't just point the gun at one thing and go, that's the problem, right? It's multi-layered, but we got to start looking at these issues that we're trying to fix in this country with making our country healthy again in a layered approach and a system approach. I love Dr. Laval's that I use this all the time. The body is a system of systems, and you can't just have tunnel vision and look at one thing when you're talking about a disease process. It seems like it always kind of peels back to the gut, and it peels back to what we're putting in our bodies. But also the other thing too, and I love what you kind of started this conversation with. This isn't really a vaccine show, but it was a great lead into where's the hysteria around what we're feeding our kids. And I've kind of been on this series of kind of Maha shows, if for lack of better term, because it's just such a hot topic. Finally, thank God, it's been a hot topic in our careers for 20 plus years, about 20 years for me and more than that for you. So it's so fun that the world is starting to a little bit catch up. But what do we do? I mean, this is just such a monster, this whole food industry, food and pharma industry, and this big snowball that's been created. And where do we start? It's a layered approach, I would imagine. Are you looking for a healthcare provider who understands the importance of integrative medicine? Evexias Health Solutions is changing the way we approach wellness. We train practitioners on cutting-edge therapies focusing on a preventative care model. If you're ready to take a proactive approach to your health, Evexias can help you find a provider who's right for you. Just head to Evexias.com, that's EVEXIAS.com, and click on the button, Find a Provider, to find a provider near you.
I think it's a little bit like this. If the child is in the womb, they're developing a palate based on what the mother is eating, even if it's not the tongue palate. Then when the child is...
They're getting exposed to chemicals that are addictive.
Very much so. Very much so. Or alternatively, if the mother is eating healthy fish and a sweet potato and broccoli and eating kale and sardines, that there's a palate. And what's going through her system is going through the child's system. Then when the child is born and it nurses for a year, it's getting those immunoglobulin, and it's also still getting, because remember, if you eat garlic, that's going to come out in the milk. Yeah. And then when you start, and I was a proponent of making baby food, so I made my own baby food. It's not that difficult. It's really not. And you start feeding that child everything from beets and peas to sweet potato and apple and pear. But here's where the diversion comes. As the child begins to develop the palate, and the palate is developing as the parent is feeding the kids, if the parent's palate isn't developed, then it starts causing a downward spiral, because the parent is going to want to give the kid anything that it wants to eat. And it's going to go for things like gluteomorphins and caseomorphins, for lack of a better term, gluten and dairy, macaroni and cheese in a box. And if you start doing that, you have lost your case for sardines or oily fish or fish that tastes like fish or lamb or organ meats. You and I were having that conversation about organ meats and about wild game. And I went out and bought wild boar sausage. I just had to put that in and ate it, and it was really gamey. And I was thinking of you as I was eating it. But if you're training your children to eat these foods, technically that's going to come from what you're eating. Yeah. But if you don't eat those foods, then they don't see you eating those foods. If they don't see you cooking, if they don't see you doing those things, and if you, for example, say, ooh, I won't eat sardines, then your kid is not going to eat sardines. And it goes over and over and over. And now you have a child that by the time they're 7, they are not eating food. And I'll tell you, this has probably been the biggest challenge in my career, is teaching mothers how to teach themselves how to eat so that they can teach their children how to eat. And they do not have the stamina or the bandwidth. And this is the trick of the trade. If you're going to give your kids something new, you give them the same food that they like to eat on the plate with the new food, with grass-fed butter and Celtic salt. Make it savory, make it umami, make it have flavor, and make them have it 3 days in a row. Because otherwise, and some people even say, every day. Give them the thing that they normally like and now the new food. And then you don't try 4 different new foods at one time. And eventually they will learn to eat the beet or the broccoli or the pea or what it is that you're trying to teach them.
I was really impressed, and we would hang out in the summer and she'd be cooking dinner, and before every single meal, because kids are always hungry before dinner's ready and they want a snack. And she had cut up celery and carrots and radishes on a platter, and she didn't give them a choice to eat it. She made them eat it. You eat this before there's dinner. And they did. They developed a palate. And then I saw through the years, they would come in and go, where's my carrots and celery? You know, they were asking for it. So what you're saying is so true. I've seen that play out. And you know, I always want to say this because I was a mom who felt prey to the marketing. And, you know, when I built my first house, having the Costco pantry, you know, so I could have all my quick Costco snacks for my kids and they could just go in there and, you know, get whatever they want, because I was so marketed to. And the hysteria, just like the hysteria around the, oh my gosh, the measles outbreak because this parent didn't vaccinate their kid, and oh my gosh, the world is falling apart, compared to, you know, that was, you know, 2015 compared to 1968, where the whole Brady family was checking it off the box. Well, he's got the measles now and he's got the measles now. You know, but this is where I get so passionate about, why aren't we getting that upset about it being legal to put vending machines and feed our children in schools poison, addictive poison that's been shown in clinical studies to be as addictive as cocaine, sugar, number one. So why aren't we getting excited about that? Why isn't the food industry requiring warning labels on foods like that, much like we do cigarettes now? Why isn't that happening? I mean, it's a rhetorical question, but...
And think about Jamie Oliver. I don't know if you remember, he did a TED Talk. He's a famous London chef. And he took I think it was a wheelbarrow full of sugar and poured it on the stage and said, this is how much sugar a kid gets in a year drinking chocolate milk at school. Just chocolate milk. And Mark Hyman, which you brought up earlier in the conversation that we had, talking about school lunches. And then I've seen videos which children making their own lunch and eating their own food in Japan. And interestingly enough, my 15-year-old is taking a cultures and cuisines course, and it's sort of around the States in this semester or trimester that he's in. And it's good, but the things that they're cooking are clam chowder and fried food. Yeah. And I'm curious why she's not telling them how to make a salad, cut up vegetables, and show them that, you know, in this state they fish for catfish and this is how they cook it, but instead of frying it, maybe they steam it. I mean, I'm just bringing that up, but...
Well, you know, you brought up a good point that we had talked about a little bit earlier too, just touched on. And I wonder if, you know, we've talked about the blue zones and Sardinia and different Mediterranean companies in Japan, but I wonder if this has something to do with the fact that we don't really have a food culture in America. We're kind of a melting pot of a lot of different ethnicities, which is what makes America really great. But when it comes to food, these other smaller countries, there's a whole culture around food that is really special. And I think even in our country, meal times are not even special
anymore.
You know, everybody's sitting on their phones. You go out to dinner anytime and you look at your neighbors. I'll tell you, we were very blessed to be able to go to France for a vacation a couple of years ago. And we met a local guy. He was amazing. He took us to a local restaurant where all the locals went. And so in this plaza, this piazza, the patios, the patio tables from several different restaurants all kind of shared space. And so you had probably 100 people in this whole piazza that were just sitting outside at these different restaurants because they don't have air conditioning inside. So everybody's sitting outside. But what was fascinating, and I looked around and I made this comment to my husband. I said, look around. What do you see? And he goes, nobody's on their phone. Nobody. And these were young people in their teens, in their 20s. The other thing that happened that we thought was so cool, and we videoed it, was there was one kind of singer that was, I guess, shared from all the restaurants. And he started singing what must have been a local famous song. And they started handing out sparklers. And the next thing you know, there's this whole community of 100 souls singing this song together and raising a sparkler and just having fun. They're engaged in life. And that's culture.
Yes.
So I wonder if our culture is, what is our culture? Hot dogs and apple pie and, kind of thing.
They certainly wouldn't be giving out sparklers. I mean, that would be some kind of fire issue.
I'm not saying this from a judgmental perspective. It's just food for thought, pun intended. It's food for thought about what are we creating in our microcultures of our families and our homes and preparing meals together. Meal times for a lot of families is stressful.
Very.
Mom's working and she's coming home and she's had to go to the store and, or whatever. Maybe it's the dad. I don't want to, gender, make that a thing because a lot of dads cook. But whoever it is there's typically a person responsible and they're doing, all the cooking and there's a lot of chaos going on. What about getting people involved and getting, come sit with me or, sometimes, it used to be I was in the kitchen cooking and all my girls were watching TV somewhere on their phones and not fun. Like, y'all come in here and at least sit down and talk to me while I'm preparing your meals.
Right. Or learn from you.
So remember, it brings me back to this thought about the centurions and these blue zones of how there's community, and there's community around the dinner table, so I'm talking about bouncing around a lot of different things, but your comment about culture just had this pop in my mind of maybe that's part of it. We're lacking a respect and an honor for the culture around meals and mealtime.
That, and I mean, if you think about it, the hamburger is our food culture.
That is true.
The hamburger and the fries.
And the French fries.
And you think about this.
And potatoes made in deck fat.
Right. Think about the conversation that we had earlier about Steak and Shake. And it's again, this big idea that the novelty of beef tallow is healthier for us than seed oils. Okay, that's number one. Fine. I'll acknowledge that. But not when it's not a real potato. Right. And equally, think about this. In Greece, if you eat fried potatoes, which you might get Greek fries, they're sliced into rounds and they have oregano and salt on them, but they're cooked in olive oil. And they're, and they're very quickly cooked because they're very thinly sliced. And you might have that with a salad and sardines and a glass of Retsina or a glass of wine. And you're in the, underneath the Acropolis at the Plaka and you're eating with all these people and you're eating outside and there's this culture. So the frying of that food is not as unhealthy as the frying of the food because fried food is not that good. So our culture in America is the burger and the fry. It's not the... And is that a Sunday dinner? No. Is that a weeknight dinner? Well, it becomes a weeknight dinner. Pizza, pasta, and burgers. Not roast chicken, roasted potatoes, or a beef stew, or salad.
This has got to be I don't know. I grew up in a lower socioeconomic family. We had, 5 of us lived in a small 3-bedroom, 1-bath house. My father was a brick mason. We didn't grow up with money, but we had fresh food, fresh meals. We didn't have steak that often because we couldn't afford it. But every Sunday, my grandmother cooked dinner and we all went over to her house and she made a pot roast or whatever that was. And I remember getting in the kitchen and she would have me chop, carrots or do whatever I could to help. And I think we've lost that, that aspect of our culture in our society. And I just keep bringing it back to this whole conversation of this Make America Healthy Again. How can we peel back the layer, and get really at the root of it, which is in our household? And I don't want to, I always am so careful about sounding judgy because I'm not. Like I said, I've been there. I've been played to, marketed that, this, granola, Nature Valley granola bar is healthy and full of all kinds of grains and fiber, and it has made with real honey, things like that. But so it's not a judgment thing. It's more of an education thing. And I think parents should be, and there's this Maha Mom movement. I think parents should be hysterical about what is being offered to our children, because that's going to give a much more negative long-term impact than having a measles outbreak.
I completely agree. And think about the 1950s where we were the sort of TV dinner philosophy, that taking the woman out of the kitchen as she went and got a job and started to work, it became less important for her to be cooking the meals, and they were eating that, the TV dinner. And look what you can do in 5 seconds. And that TV dinner came down to, well, you don't want to be slaving away in the kitchen. And why shouldn't women go and work in the corporate environment and not be home with their kids? Because if you aren't home with your kids, you can't teach them how to cook, and you can't have a relaxed community environment. And having those Sunday dinners, we had those Sunday dinners growing up. And I feel like in Europe, I think it's more family oriented, and I think everybody's so dispersed. You might have a family where one child is in one state, another's in another state, and the family unit isn't together anymore. And
we use the excuse of being too busy. I mean, I even can, I'm looking in the mirror when I say this. Our adult children live within a 30-mile vicinity, and we could very easily get together a lot more often than we do and make something regular. So it just takes effort.
It does.
It takes effort. It takes desire. It takes the want to, and the want to be different and to educate. What is one more thing before we wrap it up that if you were to say this is something that parents should get hysterical about?
Chlorinated carrots.
Okay, tell me about that.
So those little baby carrots are not baby carrots. They're little carrots that started out as a big carrot, cut up and then sprayed with chlorine so that they can last inside a plastic package. And you notice how when you put those carrots out, they're white. First of all, they taste terrible, but they're white and they're dry. And I mean, they're not carrots. Get some real carrots still with the tops on and peel them and cut them and give them carrots.
Taste good.
And they taste like real carrots.
Your kids might enjoy carrots if we didn't give them these baby carrots out of the bag to dip in some seed oil ranch dressing.
And the Nordic lady, FYI, has a whole thing on don't eat carrots, they're toxic. So we'll have to circle back around that and the people that say don't eat spinach because you get oxalates.
Well, we've got a little bit of time to talk about don't eat carrots because we started with why aren't we hysterical about these things instead of this measles thing. So talk a little bit about why carrots aren't toxic and why oxalates aren't that bad.
So, well, this particular, I guess she's a researcher or she does lectures and she looks Viking and she says, the reason why we have a high stomach acid and the reason why we have these type of teeth is to eat meat. Well, yes, but not only meat. And then she said, we've taken carrots, which never looked like an orange carrot. It started out as a white root vegetable that is actually slightly toxic. But remember the idea of anti-nutrients. The plants create these toxins in order to fight the elements. So you could say a carrot is toxic, but you can also say that other plant foods are toxic. Lectins are there. Name anything.
Well, you could also say that the grains that are being fed to the cows are also toxic, or the grass that's been sprayed with glyphosate, if they're grass-fed or free-range, cows. I mean, you could have that conversation about anything.
About anything. So I think for me, I think these people are getting on Instagram and they're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And I've seen a lot on spinach. Don't eat spinach. It's an anti-nutrient. It creates oxalates, and oxalates create kidney stones. But that's not the whole story. The real story is, yes, oxalates can create kidney stones, but are you eating enough calcium? Are you drinking enough water? Then you have podcasters or Instagram influencers saying we're drinking too much water and the water is draining our kidneys. And how is anybody to make sense? I think we have to find some common ground. I think a carrot is okay, but should we be eating 15 pounds of carrots every day? No. Kale is okay, but should we be eating kale in every meal? No. And spinach is okay. It is certainly better to eat cooked than it is raw. But remember earlier I said to you 5 to 7 servings of vegetables, and a serving is a half a cup cooked and 1 to 2 cups raw. So if that's a serving, by the time you've reached 5 servings in a day, you've had 1 carrot, a half a cup of cooked spinach, 2 cups of salad, that's 3 servings. Let's say you have a chopped sweet potato. This much is a half a cup and 1 other vegetable, peas. And by that time, you've had your vegetables, and that's not a lot of plant foods in the reality of it. So for me, I think we have to just be careful. I think a plant-forward diet, a Mediterranean diet, emphasizing community. I think you really hit on something, because Mark Hyman talks about that a lot. And I think we've lost that ability to teach our children how to cook so they can teach their children. And if you develop the palate in the womb and you continue to develop the palate of a child as they grow, then that goes down into generations and generations. And we've lost that. And I think we need to sort of bring that back.
Absolutely. The one thing I've thought of before we wrap it up, and because I'm present to the fact that I'll drip, formula, baby formula is bad. And there might be somebody listening that couldn't breastfeed, or maybe they adopted their baby, or whatever. What are some options? Well, number one, breast milk banks are crazy big. Even one of my daughters that had a baby last year, she went through a time in the beginning where she wasn't making enough milk. Mm-hmm. And there are certified breast milk
producers
that are selling their breast milk. There probably should be a little regulation around that. But the really good ones will have a whole health printout and labs, and they don't have this and they don't have that. But nothing else. There's breast milk banks. There's also other formulas that I've been told from Germany and other places, a little more expensive. They have to ship here, but they don't have all the chemicals and the high fructose corn syrup. So there are options. We just need to, they're probably not on the aisles in our grocery stores. And then one last thing too, I had growing up, a girlfriend, when she had her baby, she couldn't afford baby formula. And so she used goat's milk and warmed up goat's milk. She used carnation milk and warmed up carnation canned milk. I don't know if that's a great idea. It might be better than the chemically laden formulas. I don't know. But there are options, is the point.
There are. People have multiple babies. You can't, how, think about, having 3 babies or 2 babies. It's very difficult. So I'm all for breastfeeding, but I agree with you. Many, many people can't nurse for a number of reasons. And at the end of the day, there are options out there, but it's really thinking about, if you are going to get pregnant, think